Welcome to Enviro Close-Up. I am Carl Grossman. The subject, an absolutely unique facility in Cambridge, Massachusetts, called the Citizens Environmental Laboratory. Now, for years, and it's quite a scandal, folks have been dependent on government laboratories, or actually a lot of industrial laboratories, to tell them what's safe, what's not safe. Well, an outfit in the Boston area, in Cambridge, called the Jobs and Environment Campaign, a few years ago set up the Citizens Environmental Laboratory. And the director of that laboratory is Fred Youngs. He has the whole pedigree, a PhD from Columbia University, and he does people's work in the Citizens Environmental Laboratory. And also with us is Carole Allen, and she is the executive director of the Jobs and Environment Campaign, which started this laboratory. Carole, the concept initially to begin the Citizens Environmental Laboratory.
Well, originally there was kind of a one-person operation and one piece of equipment because the need for it coming from the community was very strong. People that weren't necessarily trustful of commercial laboratories or couldn't afford them, which is a situation most times. So we've been providing this service since the organization began, and originally the lab was part of the National Toxics Campaign Fund. And when that organization closed, the Jobs and Environment Campaign picked up this valuable resource.
Now, how old is it, Fred, now, the lab?
Well, overall, we've been around for about 6 years. Since, with JEC, the Jobs and Environment Campaign, it's been the last 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years.
And you get, at this point, people from all over the country, indeed all over the world, bringing you, well, stuff to look into, bringing you their environmental concerns to analyze. Describe some of the work you've done.
Well, it's, as you say, it's pretty varied. We get people, just citizens that are moving into a new home, want to know if the soil's been contaminated with pesticides, or want to know if their water's contaminated with lead or other things. We get community groups that have organized around a certain issue, whether it's a nearby incinerator or a landfill that's leaking, down the road somewhere. So they've organized around in opposition to this particular thing and need some data to help support their arguments. We've also worked with some of the environmental groups around the country, including Greenpeace. And we've also got things from samples from around the world. We've done samples from Antarctica, Western Samoa, Russia, other places in Europe and Asia, South America. So they come from all over the place. And it's just a wide variety of different things that we do.
Now, there's a notion that science is science, that scientists are some kind of lofty types, and then when they look into something, it's done in a very objective, very impartial kind of way. You're kind of suggesting, in fact, your Citizens Environmental Laboratory all but declares that, hey, it isn't that so straight and narrow. Is there politics to scientific analysis, Fred?
Oh, certainly. There's a couple things involved, actually. One is, even if you do very straight-ahead science, say in a regular laboratory, just the way the methods are set up, methods that are set up by the Environmental Protection Agency, they may not look for all the contaminants that may be there. And what the laboratory does, their description, so to speak, is they look exactly for those 10 contaminants or those 20 contaminants and don't look for anything else. So unless the citizen calls up and knows exactly what they want to look for, they may not find it, and that's very difficult to do, particularly for someone without any scientific background. The other thing that can happen, which is something you mentioned, which is the politics get into it. It can be anything from a laboratory, say that a citizen calls up and they have concerns about something I mentioned before, say a landfill down the road. Well, it turns out that this laboratory does $500,000 of business a year from the landfill. If they happen to know where the sample is coming from and how it's going to be used against their biggest client, sometimes that comes into the equation. And it shouldn't, and it doesn't always. I don't want to say that all laboratories are like that, but it has happened in the past. And people need to be aware of it and need to take precautions to make sure they get good data that they can use.
And the alternatives, I mean, it's the Citizens Environmental Laboratory, or, well, counties and states and the federal government all have labs, and as I note, industry, they sure have plenty of labs. But, well, some of the groups that have gone to the Citizens Environmental Laboratory, Carole, did you have conversations with them in terms of, like, other places they might have gone or didn't want to go, perhaps?
I think one of the biggest things that we do is provide people that are lacking in that kind of information. I mean, the average person doesn't know about other laboratories that are available, or, you know, some don't even know about our laboratory, unfortunately. And so what we can do is walk people through a process so that they feel comfortable in getting information and being able to use it. That's the most valuable thing that we can provide, is that experience, having worked with community groups and individuals, people who are not scientists and don't have that kind of a background, but just to get the information that they need so that they can use it in their struggles.
Not only do you analyze various substances that are brought to you, Fred, but you help folks do their own sampling. Describe how you do that.
Well, yeah, actually most of the people that come to us do their own sampling, because most of the people are spread out all across the country, so we can't go out and do the sampling for them. So what we do is we'll send out, with the proper containers and all the other equipment we send to them, a set of instructions on how to take the samples. I've also talked to people over the phone any number of times to make sure they're collecting samples properly, make sure they're preserved, you know, put into a cooler, make sure they're kept cold, make sure they're sent overnight, UPS or FedEx or any number of them, to the laboratory so that we get them in time and that they're still considered good samples. So it's surprisingly enough, taking samples is quite easy. It doesn't really take a PhD or somebody trained in science to take a sample. You just have to know how to do it right, and it's pretty easy to tell people how to do it.
And you have a number of programs. Perhaps you can note those too, Carole.
Sure. The Citizens Environmental Laboratory is our biggest project, but we have two others as well. One is the Community Resource Center, which provides analysis on what's going on with the connection between jobs and the environment. People are starting to see that they're not necessarily pitted against each other any longer. So we have some documentation on things that have happened positively on that front. And we also have the Native Ecology Initiative. It's an operation that is a satellite of the Jobs and Environment Campaign being run out of Brookline Village. And we have a woman that's been working on that. The director of it is Lillian Wilmore. She is an attorney of Kiowa heritage, and she's providing Native American groups, tribes, and individuals with assistance. In particular, she's helping to write environmental codes for a number of tribes so that they can use those.
Two great needs. I mean, for so long, there's been the claim that good environmental practice is somehow detrimental to economic growth, and empowering Native Americans legally is just touch on those two issues, if we could, Carole. On that claim that those tree huggers, those environmentalists are screwing up our employment situation, what's the response?
There's a fair amount of documentation out there now that shows that what's good for the environment is good for industry, and what's good for industry is good for the environment. It just makes sense, and I think that the tie there to the Native issue is really key, because it's, for most Native peoples, that's a way of life. They see the two as connected. And one of the great things about Lillian working with Native groups is that these codes that she's writing supersede EPA regulations, and they can be more stringent. So it's providing them, you know, the opportunity to have environmental codes that are to a higher standard than we have right now. And I think that a lot of people are looking for other avenues. There's a number of Native American groups that have, you know, started looking to other sources for information, and have even used our laboratory to do some testing, because they don't necessarily trust people that are local that might have a bias.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carole. And thank you for watching. I'm Carl Grossman.